Now, question comes at this point, and I deal with each of these in a chapter in the book. We might ask, well, where does desecration most obviously manifest itself? I would say in three particular areas: sex, procreation, and death. Think about it, all three of those things have traditionally been, I would say, surrounded with sacred ritual. You know, the marriage service, it's a sacred ritual. It's a public ritual. It's saturated with religious meaning and social meaning. Sexual activity in Christianity, in Judaism, and in Islam is seen to have not just recreational significance, but also we might say cultic significance. The Old Testament prescribes special uh, rituals by which a couple that have had a sexual relationship, had sex, are able to sort of bring themselves back into a state of purity. Islam prescribes full body washing for a couple that have had a sexual relationship, as opposed to just the normal, elbows down washing that you would have before prayers. St. Paul in the New Testament will single out the man who slept with the prostitute as having committed a particularly heinous sin. The sexual nature and the sexual use of the body is seen to have profound religious, sacred significance. Think about sex in the modern world, sex as recreation. Sex as recreation is actually sex as desecration, I would say. Casual sex is desecration sex. How has that been made possible? Technology. Middle of the 19th century, you couldn't even really imagine sex as recreation because the girl might get pregnant. You might catch a terrible disease. It's only with the advent of antibiotics, it's only with the advent of effective forms of contraception that we can even begin to imagine sex as recreation. That particular act of desecration, of that particularly holy aspect of what it means to be a human being, can only be brought about in a technologized world. Think about reproduction. Various things about reproduction one could say here. First of all, the act of reproduction, of course, is that moment at which, or that point at which human beings are most godlike. Sexual intercourse creates new life. There is nothing more mysteriously godlike that human beings do than that. I remember being very struck personally when I held my granddaughter in my arms for the first time. And my mind went to, I think it's Psalm 128, verse 6. May you live to see your children's children. And before I became a grandfather, I'd always just read that verse and thought, oh, it's telling me that, may you live a long time. When I held life created by life that I had created, wow, that was a peculiar blessing. That was a powerful and distinct blessing. There's something holy about the creation of life, holy and mysterious. Think about the way reproduction has been moving in a mechanized direction. And think about what that does to the human condition. Eric Cohen, the Jewish social critic, comments that the rise of artificial reproduction will transform the relationship between parent and child from one of unconditional love to one of conditional acceptance. It's very powerful, that is. Uh, think of Iceland boasting that it has eliminated Down syndrome. Iceland has not eliminated Down syndrome. It's eliminated people with Down syndrome. It's trained us to think of people as things, as commodities, as objects. Think of some of the horrendous legal battles that have surrounded surrogacy over the last decade. forcing society to think of surrogate mothers merely as wombs with legs, and the products of their wombs as literally just products of the womb, that most sacred of things, the creation and gestation of human life, has been turned into a mechanized thing more analogous to factory production. So reproduction has been transformed. I don't know how many of you saw the Ross Douthat podcast with the woman who's involved in trying to develop really, we might say, ways of producing babies in factories. And at the end of the interview, he reads a poem to her, and the poem, it's not a great poem. I think the plot of the poem is that a couple are making love, and one of their kids wanders into the room and catches them in flagrante. And at the end of the poem, Douthit turns to this young woman and says, "Do you think that if you sort of triumph, do you think that if you get your way and in the future making babies in factories becomes the norm, do you think that something will be lost, what it means to be human?" And what's interesting about her response is the look on her face. She doesn't even have the categories to understand what he's asking. It's a stunning piece of video, stunning. And you think, wow, she is so far gone at this point. She doesn't even know quite what he's asking there. So, sex and reproduction. Death, I would say, is the third sacred area. We still have vestiges, of course, of the sacred nature of death, I think, in many states, certainly in the United Kingdom, in many states in the USA. If you were to come across a dead body and abuse it, strictly speaking, the legal charge you would face is that of desecrating a corpse. Death is regarded as something holy and mysterious. Again, Christianity, well, Judaism and Islam have special rituals that apply to those who've touched a dead body. Um, Christians, certainly in the early centuries, held the dead in great reverence, would have their would have meals in areas where there were tombs, so that the living would, in some ways, literally be having a meal in the presence of the dead. Think about how death functions in modern society. It's been trivialized by the Quentin Tarantinos of this world or the soap operas. Um, my father died 18 years ago. I can't think of him even today without a lump in my throat. Soap opera, somebody dies, and 6 weeks later, it's as if they never existed as far as the loved ones are concerned. Think of how we've shunted death to the margins. Death is, you know, we no longer have graveyards by churches. Now, I know there are zoning rules for that sort of thing, but it's still significant. Walking to worship past the graves of your ancestors would have had a distinct impact on how you thought about worship. We don't do that anymore. Think of the rise of assisted deaths. 2022 in Canada, 1 in 20 deaths was medically assisted suicide. 1 in 20. Think about that. Think about how something holy, death itself, has been taken and transformed in modernity. And reading this article today about the proposed euthanizing of small children with disabilities in Canada, it was chilling. Last week, I rewatched the old Nazi propaganda movie. You can find it on YouTube, Dasein ohne Leben, uh, Being Without Life. It is staggering to me how many of the arguments proposed in that movie are now mainstream arguments among our political class in the West today. When death is cheapened, life is cheapened. That which is sacred has been desecrated.